Now, the Government of Ireland has been wearing its most presentable clothing and attempting to look plausible for the last couple of days. The man from the European Commission has been in town trying to determine whether the country is about to go belly up the way Greece went belly up in the summer. There's no nonsense about a supposed Celtic tiger these days. The country is broke, and the government can borrow money only by offering the sorts of rates of interest the Greeks were driven to. Our economics editor, Paul Mason, reports.
With the country on the edge of bankruptcy and an austerity budget on the way, what else can you do but give away cheese? Ireland's cheese shops are preparing to dole out 53 tonnes of it free. The wits are calling it quantitative cheesing, but very few people are laughing.
Yeah, I mean, people are nervous. The budget is being, talked up. So there's an element of fear, and people are a little nervous to spend, I think, at the moment. But it's not surprising, It's going to hurt. I think it's going to hurt everybody.
The country is teetering on the edge of an EU bailout, a political crisis, and a world of pain. In the last decade, the Irish economy boomed big time. People took out big mortgages, bought second homes. As the bubble burst, so did Ireland's banks. It has cost €73 billion to bail them out. In turn, Ireland's national debt has mushroomed, and now the markets fear it cannot pay it back.
The problem is that because the Irish, as indeed the British, have guaranteed the debts of the banking sector, that means that if those debts were to be called upon, the Irish government really wouldn't be able to honour them. And so its sovereign creditworthiness is dependent upon the guarantees to the banking sector not really being called upon. That, in turn, depends upon the households being able to continue to pay back their very high mortgages.
Ireland's economy has shrunk in cash terms by 19% since 2007. Inflation, close to 5% then, has turned to deflation, with prices falling 4.5% last year. And Ireland's public finances, in surplus 3 years ago, now stand 14% in deficit. So the government, which only last year passed an austerity budget cutting €7.5 billion, now plans to double the pain. €15 billion worth of tax rises and spending cuts, $6 billion of that next year. Tonight, the EU's Finance Commissioner, Olli Rehn, went to Dublin to offer the Irish government this stark choice.
There is the dilemma of how to strike the right balance between enhancing credibility of fiscal policy to have a positive impact by front-loading of the budget measures and the negative short-term impact on growth at the same time. There is no easy way out, but one essential thing is that the composition of the measures should be such that they have the least negative impact.
Trapped between stagnation and bankruptcy, some now believe Ireland will be forced to go for a bailout by the EU and IMF, drawing on a €440 billion fund set up in May.
There's very strong commitment to avoiding bailout. It's never happened here. There was a big public finance crisis here in the 1980s. People predicted that it would end in failure, but it didn't. And with a little bit of luck, the government managed to stabilise the public finances and get out of it. And that is still there to play for. But the situation is very difficult.
In the Irish Parliament, they're seeing fiscal sovereignty drain away. The old system, one currency but national control of budgets, is being quietly abolished on the orders of Paris and Berlin.
Of course, we want to maintain in this country the maximum possible amount of control and independence over what we decide as to how to make our own budget in this country. But I think inevitably, and if you saw the European Council meeting last week, which we're discussing this afternoon in the Senate, I think that it actually demonstrates that that's not going to be the way it's going to happen in the future.
The cost of any European bailout will be high. In the short term, Ireland would effectively lose its economic sovereignty to Brussels. In the longer term, once Germany and France work out a permanent way to restructure Europe's debts, those who lent Ireland money will lose a lot of it.
So it's quite likely that the Germans will lend them, or even just give them, very large amounts of money, perhaps on the scale of tens of billions or even perhaps 100 billion euros in the end. A consequence will be that the ECB will probably end up owning much of the assets of the Irish banking sector, and the Irish government will end up owing Eurozone governments a very large amount of money.
And for an Irish generation that's grown up knowing only a property boom, cheap credit and full employment, there is now just free cheese. It's all changed, and utterly is an understatement.
Well, earlier I spoke to the Irish Finance Minister, Brian Lenihan. I began by asking him whether he could guarantee that Ireland wouldn't have to go to the European Union for a bailout.
Absolutely. We intend to return to the markets next year, and we intend to fund ourselves. That's our plan. We have put our public finances on a sustainable basis in the last 2 years. We have done massive corrections in our public debt and our deficits, and we will continue to do so. As you know, our public service wage rates were reduced by 14% on average. And in addition to that, we improved our general wage levels in the Eurozone by 7%. We've become more competitive, and our exports have grown about 6% this year alone.
Why don't people believe you?
Well, it's not a matter of belief or non-belief with respect. Markets make their assessments, and they're entitled to do that.
Yes, and their assessment is that Irish debt is very, very expensive.
That's their current assessment, but the government is taking the steps to resolve our difficulties both in the banking and on the public finances side. We have a strong underlying economy. We're moving into a balance of payments surplus next year, so we're paying our way in the world, unlike some of the other sovereigns that have difficulties in Europe. We are moving into that balance of payments surplus. We have difficulties, and we have a plan to deal with those difficulties, and we need time to work out that plan.
And when I said to you, can you guarantee you won't have to go to Europe for a bailout, you said, yes, you are unequivocal. This is a guarantee. You are cast iron, 100% certain your strategy is going to work without any need for further help.
No. Listen, let's be clear about this. We've had great help from Europe already. We have some transfer payments still from Europe in our own public finances in the form of agricultural subsidies and support for social programmes. And of course, nobody can give a 100% guarantee. No state can give a 100% guarantee of anything in the modern world. You've seen how in the United Kingdom the government has had to take very drastic measures indeed to stabilise the position of the pound and ensure that the public finances are put on a sound footing. And it would be a brave man who can predict anything. But what I am saying is that we have put our finances, and we are putting our finances on a sustainable level, as we are putting our banks on a sustainable level. As far as the issue of the recent increase in bond spreads is concerned, and there has been a dramatic increase in bond spreads in Ireland in recent weeks, it's entirely caused by the fact that doubt has been cast in certain European statements about whether peripheral European states will be allowed to repay their sovereign debts. Now, we've made it a cardinal plank of our policy that we intend to pay our debts as a state. We will pay our way, and we're determined to do that.
Wouldn't your assertion be rather more plausible were this crisis not entirely the consequence of your own incompetence?
I don't accept that at all. I've been the Minister for Finance here since 2008, dealing with these problems, tackling them on a daily basis, and making considerable progress in that regard.
Well, had you not taken the decision to bail out the banks, you wouldn't be in the mess you're in now, would you?
No, that's entirely incorrect, because one of the biggest problems in Ireland has not been the banks, but the very wide gap between public expenditure and public receipts. It's about 19 billion this year. The cost of bailing out the banks on an annualised basis for the next 10 years is about $1 billion a year. So there's $1.5 billion a year. So there's a very wide disparity there.
When you look at it from where you sit and you look back over the last 10 years of the sort of country that Ireland believed itself to be, and you look at the mess, the desolation around you now, it's a very sad end, isn't it?
No, I don't accept it's the end, and I don't accept its decimation. We have a workforce of 1.9 million. That's twice what we had 20 years ago. We have a huge workforce. It has shown huge adaptability in the present crisis. And the government are not asking people to bring their living standards back 10 years. With respect, our tax receipts went back to 2003 levels. We'll have to increase and augment them to 2005, 2006 levels. And we'll have to adjust our expenditure the same way. That's not devastation or decimation.
In the process, you've lost your sovereignty.
We haven't lost our sovereignty. We've always shared our sovereignty with our European partners. And, you know, Ireland has always been linked to a fixed currency arrangement. We're currently linked with the euro. We were linked with sterling for more than 150 years. Small countries don't have the luxury of having a separate currency. They link themselves to another currency. There's nothing unusual about that.
Minister, thank you.
Thank you.